We shouldn't be envious of bigger churches. We shouldn't try to be bigger churches. We should play to our strengths and play to the strategic purpose that a small church has. Just in the same way that some families, it makes sense for them to have a minivan, and some families, it makes sense for them to have a Honda Fit or
Yeah.
or a Mini Cooper maybe. Um, and it doesn't make sense for the guy with the Mini Cooper to look over and wish that he had that big Dodge 4x4 Turbo Cummins.
Yeah.
He has the small Mini Cooper for a reason.
Hello, welcome to NFBC Today. This is a new long format talk show that we've started here at the church. We've already done a couple, and the goal with this is to look at issues that the church is facing, particularly for us, Niagara Frontier Bible Church. We find ourselves in Western New York. And so we want to look at in future episodes. We plan to continue to hone in on these things. We've already done an episode with our dear friend John Cooper Jr. from the Niagara Gospel Mission, where we looked at how to reach Niagara Falls. So we want to continue to look at local issues. We want to continue to look at the issues in Western New York, but we also want to check in with the church around the world and around America. And today, I'm joined by truly a brother pastor, someone that I went to seminary with, Aaron Stogner. He's not a complete stranger to NFBC. Years ago, he taught a class via VMix, like we're doing now, on ministry to the handicapped for our Bible Institute, and you can still find that. But he's here today to join with me to talk about pastoring a small church and what are the challenges? What are the challenges? What are some of the benefits? Aaron, I'll just kind of bring you in now. In a world of growing megachurches and just kind of the megachurches, and I don't mean to be completely negative about this, because I know there are some faithful pastors of big churches. That's not what this is about, but we're not here to bash big churches, though certainly they're not all good. But the small church is struggling. Aaron, but before we go there, why don't you? I'm sure a lot of people here maybe did not see you at the Bible Institute. Could you kind of reintroduce yourself and maybe talk a little bit about our time together in seminary? Give people a little bit of intro. Who is the real Aaron Stogner?
The man and the myth.
The man, the myth,
Sure.
the legend.
Yeah. Sure. Well, my name is Aaron. I was born at an early age. I am a California transplant. Grew up pretty close to Sacramento and in a small town. So I mean that's going to feed into me having a desire and a passion for small town and small church ministry. But went down to LA to Master Seminary, met my wife there. I met Pastor Sam there and a bunch of other great brothers. I graduated in 2015, came up here in 2016 as an intern. I became an associate pastor after a year, and about 2 years, a year or two after that, I became the lead pastor at a semi-rural Bible church in the Washington, pretty much like Redmond, Bellevue, Seattle part of Washington. So Pacific Northwest. I've been here for about 8 years. What else you want to know about me?
Are you okay with naming the church, or would you rather not do
Yeah,
that?
it's a mouthful, but Snoqualmie Valley Bible Church.
Wow.
Snoqualmie. And our website is svbible.church. So it's probably easier just to go there and figure out how to spell Snoqualmie. But yeah, Snoqualmie Valley Bible Church.
Yeah, Niagara
And I, I
Frontier.
say I
We don't
say
have
we're
the easiest name,
semi-rural.
but I think you
Go
got us
ahead.
beat. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Um, I was when I described it as semi-rural, it definitely began as a rural church in the late '80s. 30, 40 years ago, this area, this valley was very rural, but Microsoft and Google and Costco and Boeing and T-Mobile and several other of these large conglomerate corporations have brought the tech industry and several other companies have really brought a lot of people out here into this valley. So it's there's still a lot of ruralness to it, but there is a lot of modernity to it as well. So it's kind of I kind of feel like it's like a kid in the early teenage stage when they're going through growing pains and they kind of have that squeaky voice and they're trying to find their footing. Like that's how I feel our valley is right now.
Wow, neat. Well, Aaron, we could talk for hours about seminary days. You were just telling me how meaningful Shepherd's Conference is to you, and I was just telling someone the other day how much I value my training at the Master's Seminary, and I love going back there and visiting. I've been visiting, but I haven't been to a Shepherd's Conference in a while.
Yeah.
But we we're both blessed in that we were both blessed to pretty much enter ministry right after graduation, right? Tell us your story, well, I know you told us where you were, but just a little bit of background. How did you find yourself at Snoqualmie?
So, well, I had intended to go back home to the town grew up in, but my mom passed away, and my dad passed away 10 years prior, and with my parents being gone, and I didn't have the relationship with my home church that I had when I left there. So there wasn't really anything calling me back to my hometown of Vacaville in Northern California. Um, Jennifer, my wife's mom lived in Portland, so we initially tried to go there. I couldn't find any kind of I was looking for an internship. I was looking for you know a ministerial job. I wasn't ready to be a senior pastor. I knew there were things I needed to learn, so I
Sure.
was looking for an associate, an internship, a youth pastorate, and I couldn't find anything in the Portland area. And so I opened up my search to basically the whole Northwest. And I went to the Masters website to the Find a Church feature, and I opened up about 150 um, links to all these churches that had anybody associated with Masters, and I sent them this cover letter saying, "Hey, I'm a recent graduate. I'd love to be shown a few things. If you have any opportunities for an internship or a
Sure.
associate, a youth, like let me know." And there was a guy that I went to. Well, did you know? You said you knew Carl, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, not
Yeah. So
well, but we had
there,
classes
there was
together.
a there was a guy that both of us went to seminary with. who was pastoring up here for a couple years, and he was looking for someone to fill his pulpit while he did his part-time chaplaincy at the local military base. And so what I was looking for and what he was looking for, what I needed and what the church needed just really meshed. And so he brought me up, and after a couple of years, he went to do another ministry, and um, I took over as I candidated for the job, and I got it.
Sweet. And we both became assistant pastors around the same time. I was here at NFBC, and then you became the lead pastor a few years ahead of me, and now we're both lead pastors. So we've kind of had a similar journey, which is why I wanted to do this talk with you.
So how much white and gray hair do you have now?
Uh, well,
This was solid brown when I started.
yeah, I could tell jokes for sure. Some gray hairs coming in, but
Yeah.
I do love it, and I feel privileged that the Lord has counted me. Has counted me worthy to do this task, and I hesitate to say I don't feel worthy. I don't know if any of us are. I'm grateful that the Lord lets me do this, and that's why I wanted to talk to you, Aaron, because I would say that we both pastor smaller churches, and let's get into our first question, and I really want to hear from you on this. First, what do we mean by small church? And let me elaborate a little. Do we just mean a church that is not a mega church, or are there other factors to consider? Is it the size of the building? Is it the amount of people in the congregation? Just what exactly do we mean by small church, brother?
So the answer to those secondary questions are yes and no.
Okay.
So this is kind of subjective and relative. One book that I've been reading is called Small Church Essentials by Carl. I don't know if it's Vauders or Vaders, but he talks about how he defines a small church as 250 or under. And if you've come from a large church like a Saddleback where Rick Warren pastored, or Willow Creek with Bill Hybels, or North Creek with Andy Stanley, if you've or Grace Church with John MacArthur, if you come from a place where you are accustomed to thousands of people being on the campus, then yeah, 250 or less is certainly a small church. When I say the word small church, I'm kind of thinking more like 50 to 100 or less. And typically, a small church is led by a single pastor. Typically, it's in the small church is housed in an aging building, typically with a number of upkeep projects that are 5 to 10 years overdue. Typically, the church is running on a modest or frugal budget. Typically, it's lacking a lot of the programs and bells and whistles that are typically in the larger churches.
Sure.
So is that kind of answering your question?
Yeah, and brother, would you say that smaller churches struggle to attract the young families?
Yes.
Why do you think that is? And I know we didn't go over that specifically, but just some thoughts on that. Are they all going to the big churches? What's going on there?
Yeah. So small churches, in my experience, we have. One of the difficulties with small churches is uh, they can vary depending on context and depending on the makeup of the pastor and the congregation, and these are all different. And so, another small church may not have this struggle, but I know I do. I do in my church. Um, we struggle to attract other families, especially families with children, because we have so few children of our own. And so when families with children visit us and they see that we don't have a lot of kids for their kids to mingle with, we don't have young people, to be dating or marriage candidates for their, budding teenagers. Um, they see that we don't have a youth program for their kids. That I'd say that is probably one of the largest deterrents for somebody choosing whether or not to continue at our church or go elsewhere.
Okay.
Um, I would say smaller churches also struggle with people because when you're in a larger church, with, like, say, a plethora of life groups to choose, when there's a choice of which life group to go to, you're more likely to find a group that you can mesh more naturally with. But if there's only one, if there's only one men's group or one women's group, and for whatever reason, you or your wife find it difficult or challenging, or maybe there was some reluctance for, you know um, relationships to kind of naturally form, and you think, well, that's it. I mean, this is all there is. Then the temptation is to go look at another church where there's going to be a plethora of choices to choose from. Um,
Yeah.
smaller churches and smaller ministries tend to be, this is what we are, this is what we have. So, if you don't like this, then you're going to have to go somewhere else. And that's unfortunate. That's certainly not the way we want to present ourselves. That's not the way we want our ministry to feel. We want to be adaptable. We want to compromise in the good way. We want to try to accommodate people, but you can't always do that. People don't always tell you what their preferences are, or maybe their preferences are unrealistic. So I'd say that's another big way that small
Yeah.
churches have a challenge,
Yeah.
because they may not be able to adapt or meet the desires or needs of a visiting family.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful, Aaron. And just a quick note, just the consumeristic um, attitude that exists in our world, um, and it's true. I mean, especially in some places, there could be a lot of Bible churches to choose from, and that's not necessarily a bad thing when you're just starting off in a town or maybe leaving a
Yeah,
bad church. But if you're shopping for a church every couple years, there's an issue. But that's a whole nother conversation.
yeah,
But I think that plays a little into, I can just go somewhere else, and kind
yeah.
of looking at churches more as a business that can offer you something, whether rather than as a family you can grow with. Thoughts?
Uh, I'm not. I mean, I would agree with that, and that's navigating that. As a pastor, navigating that is very challenging because you don't always. Well, like I said, families don't always communicate what their needs or preferences are,
Right.
um, and it's not always clear. I mentioned earlier about compromising in the good way, knowing when a compromise is good and when it's a compromise, like an ethical compromise or a pragmatic compromise. Sometimes that's not always clear.
No, absolutely. That is a challenge.
Yeah. can I just make another plug for this book real quick?
Please.
Um, I appreciated you saying, giving that caveat that not, we're not innately anti big church, and that's a
Mhm.
point that this guy Carl Vaders makes. Um, is that there are small churches have their purposes and their strengths, and big churches have their purposes and their strengths, and we really shouldn't be competing with each other. We should be playing to our purposes and our strengths. And small churches can do what larger churches might not be able to, and larger churches can do what small churches can't. So, I appreciated you saying that. I have to make the confession that for a number of years, and I didn't intend to do this, but I think I did have a, we must be holy, we must be doing it right because we're small kind of attitude. Um,
Mhm.
and I don't think almost like it's a false humility. Does that make sense?
Right. Right.
And so that's one thing that this guy talks about is we shouldn't be envious of bigger churches. We shouldn't try to be bigger churches. We should play to our strengths and play to the strategic purpose that a small church has. Just in the same way that some families, it makes sense for them to have a minivan, and some
Yeah.
families, it makes sense for them to have a Honda Fit
Yeah.
or a Mini Cooper maybe. Um, and it doesn't make sense for the guy with the Mini Cooper to look over and wish that he had that big Dodge 4x4 Turbo Cummins.
Yeah.
He has the small Mini Cooper for a reason. So I just appreciated that about this book.
No, and well said there. Any other challenges of pastoring a small church you want to talk about before we get to the benefits? Any other
Oh,
challenges you see?
I have a whole list of challenges.
Yeah.
Real quick, just in looking up, like the definition and the history of the megachurch. Do you know the first uh, modern megachurch, or the first megachurch in modern history?
No.
1861 Metropolitan Tabernacle in London,
Charles
pastored
Spurgeon.
by Charles Spurgeon, and that seated 6,000 people, which at that time was extremely large. The first American megachurch was in 1923 in Los Angeles, founded by Amy Semple McPherson, and that seated 5,300. And I just brought those up to illustrate. You would look at one of those and say that was a good church and it was pastored by a good guy, and then you'd look at the other one and go, maybe not so much.
Oh,
So
absolutely. And just
yeah,
to, I mean, I loved my time at Grace Community Church, and I love every time I visit there. Um, and so, again, they're just an example of why we're not saying that uh, being big is bad. Um,
it's
certainly,
different.
certainly, Grace is going to have challenges, though, that are different from the challenges our churches are facing. And I also
Yeah,
think this is probably another subject for another day. I haven't really fully developed this in my thinking yet, Aaron, but I also think the term megachurch is not just about the size of a church, but it's a certain attitude. And
hmm
you could be a smaller church and have a mega church attitude. And I haven't really prepared to flesh that out, but there's another sense in which megachurch doesn't just convey size, but I'm just going to say it, trying to be hip, trying to be cool, trying to be trendy, and that's that's got issues, but that's probably for another day. But you know what I'm trying to get
yeah,
at, brother?
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So do I have time just to go through some of these challenges
Please.
well, yeah. So um, let's see, and yes, right. I did want to give this caveat that my list of challenges is going to be longer than the list of benefits, and I want to say up front that the benefits numerically are outweighed by the difficulties, but in terms of quality or weight or substance, the benefits are greater and they're worth it.
Cool.
Um, so I wouldn't want someone to hear me go on. I mean, I don't intend to go on for half an hour, but however long this takes, I don't want someone to see the amount of time that I'm taking up and compare it to the amount of time I talk about the benefits and go, oh man, this guy must really hate small town ministry. Um, but anyway, my
Yeah,
purpose
take it
of
away.
going, yeah. So one other thing that just to say at the outset of talking about the challenges of small church pastoring and small church ministry is that a lot of these coincide with being a solo pastor. This guy, excuse me, Gary McIntosh. Oh my, I haven't coughed all day and now it's starting to come. So
That's okay.
anyway, this guy, he talks about how roughly somewhere between about half to two-thirds of all Protestant churches are pastored by a single pastor. Um,
Okay.
I think it was the Methodist Church was half of them. The Southern Baptist Confession was about two-thirds. Um, so a lot of churches are pastored by a single solitary pastor, and so that's really intertwined with a lot of these challenges.
Okay.
So I just wanted to say that at the offset.
No, that's good.
Uh, let's see. I think one of the simplest challenges is that smaller churches typically have smaller budgets, and we understand. We see the connection between a smaller church body typically means smaller offering totals, and that means a smaller list of things that the church can do
Mm.
with that money. Um,
Yeah.
Often, let's see, unless the pastor is getting his salary entirely outside the church, which does happen, um, people may not realize that personnel salary is usually the biggest item on the annual budget. And the smaller that budget is, the quicker it gets filled up with things like personnel salary, facility upkeep, repairs, improvements, things
Sure.
that the church wants to throw money at, like outreach efforts, benevolence ministry, uh, charity ministries. As a pastor, I want to put good. I remember Mark Dever at a ShepCon talking about one way he disciples people is by putting good books in their hands for them. And so I
Mm.
want to buy books and give them away and give them to men so that they'll read but that costs money. Amazon doesn't work on charity. Um,
Mm.
so all of these things, if you took a basic economy class, you know that you can only do with what you have money to do with. So smaller budget means a smaller list of stuff you can do. Um,
Yeah.
there's a lack of resources and people. So just like with less money, a smaller body pool to draw from means less service and less stuff that can get done. And what has been a common misconception is that church life is supposed to be the pastor being a one man show. And I think of that old time image of a guy, he has drums and cymbals, and a trumpet and a trombone and a and he's playing like 6 or 7 or 8 instruments all at once. Every single part of his body is connected to an instrument somehow, and he's a one man band. That's not what church life is supposed to be.
No.
And I draw that from Ephesians 4, um,
Sure.
where see Ephesians 4:7 says that to each of us grace was given according to the measure of Christ's gift. Verse 12, that this was to be done for the equipping the saints for the work of service. I'm sorry, this is the reason why pastors, teachers, evangelists, and apostles were given for equipping the saints for the work of service to the building up of the body of Christ. And then verse 16, from whom the whole body being fitted and held together by what every joint supplies, according to the proper working of each individual part, causes the growth of the body for the building up of itself in love. So that's just a fundamental passage to go to see that everybody has been gifted in some way so as to serve and make a contribution towards the whole. The pastor's not doing everything.
Right.
Um, and if you want to, if you want to know, like, where can you find what kind of gifts there are, there's Romans 12:6-8. There's 1 Corinthians 12:8-10. And then later on in the same chapter, verses 28-30. These lists are not exhaustive. They're more some examples, but not an exhaustive list.
Right, we just talked about this in our Bible Institute class tonight. Yeah, there's 7
Yeah.
lists total. I don't have them all in
Yeah,
front of
okay.
me, but
Yeah. So
lack of resources, lack of people.
yeah.
Okay.
And one of the challenges that this then puts upon us is that if I see that there's an opportunity or a need to be done, and there's nobody to do it, whether because they don't have they're either not able, or they don't have time, or simply there's just no one to do that, then it falls on me to do it. If I really believe it's important and something that needs to be done, then I need to do it. Otherwise, it's not going to get done. And so, depending on, depending on each individual pastor and his context, that can soak up a lot of whatever remaining time and energy he has. With a lack of other people, like in here where I'm the only one that's in the office almost all the time, except for Sunday mornings, because our office is connected to the church. When someone who's in, I'll let the cat out of the bag. I struggle with being wise and disciplined with my time. And when you're the only person in the office, it's really easy to not be wise and disciplined with your time. If you are in a larger church where you have a secretary, you have people, you're part of meetings, you're collaborating with people. It feels a lot more like a group project, and that's kind of a drive. That's a naturally built-in drive to be productive and to stay focused. But if nobody knows, if nobody knows or nobody cares what time you're arriving at the office, or even if you even go to the office, because there's nobody there, the temptation to just not go into the office at all is very much present. Let's see. A lot of solo pastors are usually bivocational, so they're working outside the church to help make ends meet. Uh, because, as I stated earlier, small churches usually have smaller budgets. How much they have to be bivocational again varies on the individual. I don't have any real trade skills, so I do airport runs, I do dump runs, I mow lawns. During the summer, not so much right now. If I had the trade skill of being a woodworker, a carpenter, an electrician, a plumber, um, I don't think I'd have to work quite as much bivocationally as I do doing airport runs. Um, so that just kind of depends on who the guy is. Do you know Chris Leduc?
Yes, I remember Chris, and he's got a YouTube channel too.
Yeah, that brother sold X-ray machines to hospitals, and he was able to fully provide for his family doing that. I hope that's not something I'm not supposed to say, but I mean he's not at that church anymore. But he was able to fully provide for his family because of the unique situation, the unique set of skills and assets that he had. I have to drive people to the airport. It takes a lot more hours to do that to make ends meet than to sell an X-ray machine. I wish I could do that.
Sure.
Um, let's see. I already said that in another way. We end up wearing more hats than we often signed up for. Um, you get
So we
hired
can
on as
also
the
say,
as
if I can just summarize for a minute, one of the problems is lack of resources, lack of
yeah,
people, and then I'm inferring from all of this lack of time as well.
yes,
Lack of, again, depending on the context, um, but especially in cases where the pastor has to work a second job, that's especially going to make um, uh, time very scarce.
yeah,
So good stuff. No, I
um,
appreciate. This is great.
yeah,
And every small
um,
church is different. We understand that,
yeah,
but
yeah. With wearing these, one challenge that comes with wearing all these hats is that some of them, unless the Lord made you to just be a Swiss Army knife of, I'm sorry, unless the Lord made you to be a Swiss Army knife of awesomeness, and you are just skilled in everything you do, you're most likely going to have some areas that you are not skilled in or that you're not passionate for. And but you nevertheless have to wear those hats and carry out those ministries anyway. And you will be judged by how poorly you do it or by the mistakes you make. So somebody who gets hired on as the pastor and the preacher, which would naturally include counseling, also becomes the youth pastor, the Awana leader. Maybe he or most often his wife becomes the piano player. One of them becomes the VBS director, and the outreach coordinator and the small group leader and the Sunday school teacher and the groundskeeper and the administrator and the pantry stalker and the social media point man. Um, some of those areas he may not be gifted in. Some of those areas he may not know what to do or how to do it. Um, this often leads to intense feelings of unworthiness, like you alluded to earlier. And what just really makes it worse is he's often criticized and judged for not doing a good job. Um, often when many of these things were never in his job description to begin with. Um, Solo pastors and small church leaders rarely get breaks. As we mentioned earlier, a smaller personnel pool means less rotation and time away from the pulpit. Um, One area that I discovered by walking through this was that being a solo pastor makes it difficult when you have to be the disciplinarian. And why is that difficult? It's because if you are the only one who's bringing charges against someone, it is very easy for them to uh, create a narrative you have something personal against them. This is a vendetta. This isn't fair. Because most often in these cases, not always, but in the case that I walked through, uh, no one else was privy to the things that I was privy to. No one else, unless I showed them text messages and stuff. Um, it was me and me alone bringing the charges against a man that we eventually had to discipline, and it came across like, well, it's my word versus him. And when you have that's just not good. That's not good. That's not beneficial to be in that situation where people basically have to give you the benefit of the doubt. There's a reason Scripture says that things should be settled on the matter of two or three witnesses. There's a reason for the method of Matthew 18. And if you are a solo pastor, if you have no deacons, if you have no one else who's been involved in the church discipline process, it can make you look like you're the bad guy,
And
and
Aaron,
that deteriorates trust. Does that make sense?
yeah, let me interject for a minute for the people at NFBC so they understand your context. And when we say you are a solo pastor, and we mean solo pastor, we don't mean solo on staff pastor. You don't have any lay elders, correct?
I I have correct.
I hope that's okay to share, but
Yeah,
just so they understand your context, because I'm thankful for fellow elders here. I'm the only pastor on staff, and we know, that's another discussion, that pastor and elder are the same office, but we also recognize those who are set apart for preaching and teaching. But that's just got to be especially difficult for you to be in that situation where there's no other co-laborers in regard to pastoring, eldering.
yeah, yeah. When you're shepherding people, they're as you have children now, right? But they're not.
I sure do.
Okay, how old are they?
Johanna Grace is going to be 11 months on December 25th.
Okay, so you're not quite at the disciplining stage yet, but so I mean, you know that shepherding involves times of being curt, of being precise with your words, being decisive in action. Um, and you want to restrain being heavy-handed, but there are times, there's a voice and a manner that you have for somebody who's teachable, and there's a voice and a manner that you carry when they're difficult. Um, uh, if you have nobody that you can, if you have nobody that you can share your concerns with, if you have nobody that you can show a questionable text, if somebody becomes unruly with you and sends you a drunken slur in a text message, you get a barrage of cursing at 2 a.m. because someone's intoxicated. At what point do you start showing that to people and bring other people in so that, I mean, are you getting a sense of the tension of the
Yeah,
when is it appropriate? Who can you talk
and
to?
you got to be
Uh,
careful. You have to be careful with your wife. Certain things we
yeah,
do share with our wives, but we also have to protect them.
yeah, yeah.
Yes,
So,
I
um,
understand the
you
dilemma.
know, yeah. So yeah, when you have a team of guys, when you have multiple elders, and multiple individuals who are involved in the shepherding and caring of the church body, then you can, as appropriate, you can bring them in, you can make others aware. But if you're the only one, what are you supposed to do? How do you know when it's too soon, or how do you know when it's too late? So
So
that's been my challenge.
I'm going to identify this problem as the problem of loneliness,
Hmm.
right?
Yes, feeling isolated, feeling lonely, feeling that other people they're either indifferent or ignorant of what's going on. Feeling like no one's supporting you. Um, and all this, I mean, everything that we've mentioned, all this stress, all this difficulty, all this feeling of not being not being fit for the job, being spent with little to no relief. This almost always, sooner or later, it will almost always affect the pastor's home. And you look at the qualifications of an elder, and he needs to be able to manage his home. If when all this affects his home, this has the potential to undermine the very role that he has, and to disqualify him from ministry if he begins to neglect his family. Um, so this just adds to the burden. I have had seasons in ministry where you know ministry is stressful, and then I come home and there's stress at home, and that feeling like you have no quarter, you have nowhere to go. It can be very debilitating.
Hmm.
So um, okay, so I said I gave the caveat. I gave the caveat earlier that yes, the list of of struggles and challenges are longer, but that the list of benefits outweighed them. And I want to just take your attention to Second Timothy 2, um, where Paul says in verse 1 to 6, he says, "You therefore, my son, be strong in the grace that is in Christ Jesus. The things which you have heard from me in the presence of many others, entrust these to faithful men who will be able to teach others also." He says, "Suffer hardship with me as a good soldier of Christ Jesus." And um, he gives three pictures, three analogies of the minister. He says, "No soldier in active service entangles himself in the affairs of everyday life, so that he may please the one who enlisted him as a soldier. Also, if anyone competes as an athlete, he does not win the prize unless he competes according to the rules." And then he says the hardworking farmer ought to be the first to receive his share of the crops. And you know I see in what I see in each of those, what I see in common with each of those pictures, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
I see a an occupation. I see a responsibility that takes great effort, great discipline, and great sacrifice before enjoying great results,
Mm.
which are often long term great results.
Right.
Um, so, I just, I mean, what else could you compare in this life? In the secular world, what can you compare to being used by the Lord to preach the gospel so as to invite people into the kingdom of God, to be a means of the Lord saving people. To be, as Paul says in Second Corinthians 4, to be a jar of clay that has this precious ministry of reconciliation. What can you compare that to, um, that wouldn't be immediately dwarfed by the glorious reality of being used by the Lord for such a thing like that?
Right. it's a high honor for sure. And yeah, we just went through these verses. We're in Second Timothy now, and yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you. And each of them gives a different angle. The the danger and the seriousness of being in the military, the strenuousness of training as an athlete, and the patience and difficulty required of being a farmer. They're all helpful analogies from different angles that the Lord has given us
Yeah.
here.
Whether it's the soldier who, he goes through the war, and at the end of the war, when his side wins, he says it was worth it. And the athlete, who just is spent, but at the finish line, he says it's worth it. Or the farmer, after a long season has come and gone, and he's finally enjoying his harvest, he says it's worth it. I look at the ministry. I look to the thought of being of what I hope it's not presumptuous for me to say this, but I look forward to seeing the Lord and hearing Him say, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Uh,
Yeah,
I want to see Him pleased with me, so
good.
it'll be worth it.
That's good. Well,
So
yeah,
some
good.
of did you want to talk about the benefits, or did you?
Yeah, yeah. Keep going.
Okay, okay. So I think the most straightforward benefit to smaller ministry is that small church ministry is simplified or perhaps streamlined. That is to say, there are fewer moving pieces and fewer blocks in the puzzle. If I were to give you a Lego set of 20 pieces and a Lego set of 2,000 pieces, which one is going to be easier to figure out how all the pieces go together?
Mm-hmm. Understood.
So, you look at a smaller church with fewer people. Your primary responsibilities are to preach and to counsel and to admonish and to encourage and to evangelize. And you do those things, and you know that you're supposed to equip the people and build them up in the Lord, and encourage them to serve in the way that they've been gifted. The smaller the church body, I'm not saying it's not difficult, but it's simpler because you have fewer and smaller pieces.
Right.
Look at all the things that John MacArthur has to do, on a weekly basis, or that he's had to do over the decades. He's a pastor and administrator of a he's the president of a college and a seminary, and he speaks at conferences. There's a lot more moving parts and pieces to the puzzle when you're involved in leadership of a big church. Um,
Makes
with a
sense.
smaller church body, it also helps you know precisely who you're responsible for.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say it's easier to be acquainted with 50 people than it is, and to know their struggles, know their trials, and to know how to shepherd them and lead them in their struggles and trials, than to have 200 people. And that's easier than having 500 people, and that's easier than having 1,000 people.
Yeah, that's one of the things that
So,
I would have I thought of is more fellowship. It's easier to fellowship with everybody,
yeah,
to know people better, to
yeah.
know
I
more
we
people
we
better.
had a we have a sweet woman, a dear woman, who, I don't know where she came from, but she came from a bigger church. And about a month after she had visited our church, I walked up to her after service and I asked her if we could take her, if my wife and I could take her out to lunch. And she had this deer in the headlight look on her face, and she was absolutely speechless. And she told me later, She had never been approached by the pastor before, and so she had never been invited by someone in leadership to go out to lunch, and it caught her by surprise.
Wow.
You can hide in a church of 250, 500 people. You can certainly hide in a church of three or four or 5,000. Um, I don't know about you. I could remember times at Grace Church where, I would meet someone for the first time and I thought, I asked, how long have you been coming to Grace? Thinking it's maybe been a month. They'd been there for like 20 years,
Yeah.
you know. You can't hide in a church of, less than 50. Um, and from a pastoral point of view, it also helps me, kind of gauge where people are. It helps my shepherding because when somebody is absent, when there are irregularities in their attendance or in their involvement, that kind of is a cue for me. I need to maybe ask some questions and see how they're doing. When you're in a larger church, it's a lot harder to just be aware of where your people are.
Right. And to clarify on something I said, it's not that a pastor in a big church or a mega church can't know a lot of people. He might know more people than a pastor of a small church, but the advantage is in a smaller church, you can know most of your congregation. You have a better chance of knowing the majority of your congregation than if you were in a
Yeah,
larger church. And of course, larger churches, if they're doing it right, are going to have different elders taking care of different portions
yeah.
of the flock.
I don't. This is just an opinion of mine. I think a healthy ratio is is at most one elder or shepherd per 100 people, and I get
Okay.
that number from a guy named Chris Roseborough.
Yeah.
He has a podcast ministry called Fighting for the Faith,
Right. Yes.
and he used to be his major in college was business, and he talks about how there were studies he had read where the point at which like a manager, a supervisor, or basically a leader of a company, the point at which he could effectively supervise um, his workforce started to decline at about 100 people. So if you're in as the church is growing, I would say, you look at the qualifications of an elder, and the first one is if somebody desires the work. You know, if someone desires the work and they're qualified, like take them through the process and make them an elder. Uh, can a church have too many pastors? I mean, I don't know, but once you start going exceeding the ratio of one leader per 100 people, you really should be praying and doing what you can to try to raise someone up into leadership.
That makes sense.
um,
That makes sense. Like you said, it's an opinion, but it makes sense.
yeah. um, I'd say you said something about relationships a few minutes ago. I'm probably not gonna say this as well as you could or as well as you did, but relationships in a smaller family, especially as you've learned to work through and endure people that you wouldn't normally be inclined to associate with or endure, but you do so because you know that the Lord has put them in your church family, and you've bonded. Those relationships tend to be more meaningful than someone that you're associating with because you have some similar hobbies. I don't know if that you look at 1 Corinthians 12 and you see how Paul says that the Lord puts the word he uses is baptize, but he deposits people into the body, and it's for the purpose of one being a hand and the other being an ear, and we're serving different means in the same body. And when you get a sense of that,
We just
you actually
talking about
you
that.
actually appreciate that the people you're sitting next to are different from you. I think that really helps to make more meaningful and more substantial relationships. Um, Maybe I'm off on that, but I that's um, the majority of the people in my church are older. Um, and there are things that I have less in common with them than I do with people my age, and yet I love these people. I love spending time with them. I love hearing how God has been good and gracious to them. I love hearing their stories. I love encouraging them. I love getting to know them more and more. And if we didn't have that unity in Christ and that purpose in Christ, if it was just a secular um, basis of union, I don't think we would have that. It-
And if I may just for a moment, our senior saints are so valuable, and in our desire to have young people, we can't forget the value of senior saints. I remember when I was going to young adult ministry, and it was good. And part of it is you're single, you're hoping to meet someone, and it's good. But if you're just around people your age, that's an imbalance. You need some silver hair. And on the small
Yep.
church note, again, I loved my time at Grace. I loved Grace Community Church, and I loved visiting. But I remember even being there when I was in seminary and missing this church where I am right now and missing the coffee hour. And I even told her, Chris Martineau, she serves coffee here. I says, I remember thinking about, you serving coffee and the fellowship around at the small church, and I really missed that. And but brother, let's do this. Let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we'll finish at the end of the break. It's
Okay.
possible I'll turn this into a second episode, but we'll see.
Okay.
But if not, it'll be a break. But let's take a quick water break, and then we can finish this episode. Sound good?
Yep.
All right, we'll be right back.